Greetings and como mai, fellow educators and students, and welcome to this week's episode of Enterprising Educators. And I'm absolutely thrilled to have you here today. Today's topic is how to build community in your classroom. This is part of a series. This is going to be part one of who knows how long this could be. Please let me know in the comments if you'd like to go further with this. The purpose of this video is to start a dialogue on how you can build authentic, supportive, and just a really fun community that you can have in your classroom. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, if you like what you're seeing, if you'd like to be part of the Enterprising Educators crew, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, if you have a different course for us to take, if you'd like to plot a course for this channel to go, something that's related to education, please let me know in the comments below and we will go there. I'm absolutely thrilled to boldly go, as they say, where you would like me to go. So, what I want to talk about with this video is to really emphasize the power of community, especially given current events. I have not taught really in a classroom in the last 18 months. And the practices that I'm going to show you in this video, the 5 practices or directives, have stood the test of time. They have stood every single trial that could potentially happen in the field of American education. And I say that keeping in account that we did a pandemic, we did in person, and then we did whatever hybrid monstrosity comprehensive distance learning was. My brain repressed what that acronym meant because I just despised it so much. So with that said, we are going to teleport across various different parts of the digital frontier to illustrate this point in the best way possible. So let's teleport to the first 2 directives. Energize. Okay. Well, here we are on the bridge of the Enterprise, folks, and I can think of no better place to start this first directive, and that is show that you care in an authentic way. Now, folks, out of all the directives out there, this one is number 1, or the prime directive if you speak Star Trek, because without this directive, everything else falls apart. So with that in mind, you can show that you care in a couple different ways. This kind of mindset that I have, in which I view my students as my crew, and the classes that I teach are my little starship, that kind of mindset helps influence me in so many different ways, and it's the first step towards building a broader community. Now, when you take a look at a military-like setting, as a person who is somewhat familiar with military culture, not just through watching Star Trek, but other things, you take a look at what's going on with your class and you try to figure out ways to boost what is referred to as morale, the general emotional state. And there's various ways that you can do that. One that you can do, or to get into the habit of doing, is simply meeting students at the door, trying to memorize all their names. And I got to tell you, folks, that this step is exhausting, but especially if you have a caseload like mine, that's about 180 students a year. But once you get those names memorized, it speaks volumes to the students. And additionally, it allows you to, using my handy dandy little gadget here, figure out what's going on with each student as they come in through the door. Once you get into the habit of meeting students at the door, you figure out what you could expect from each student, and if something deviates from the norm, using the little gadget here, you get to figure out what's going on with them, and you quickly make adjustments if necessary as to how to deal with instructions. All those things to boost morale. Now, that ties into the second connection there too. The second directive, you could say, is building your socio-emotional learning connections as soon as possible. Now, I made a completely different video on this, but it is extremely important to build a foundation for socio-emotional learning. And there's a video, link in the description, where you can see this play out in greater detail. But, and this is why it ties back into the prime directive, students know when you care. I will never forget this. A student came to my wedding and actually sat at the same guest table as my mother, who is a retired English teacher. And what that student told my mother has stayed with me ever since that blessed day. And that is, I am here because I care for Mr. Garcia, and I know through the years he has cared for me. You can always tell when a teacher cares. And developing that, folks, developing those kinds of connections is a delicate process. Once again, link in the description below. There's an entire video that I've made that is dedicated to that exact process. But between those two steps, everything else falls together nicely. So with that in mind, let's start teleporting to the next directive. All right, you got this button. Wait a minute, I think something went wrong in the transporter, but just the same, this is actually a good blending of the next directive, and that is develop isms that blend your interests with them. Now, what do I say by isms? Now, you might have noticed that I include several different kinds of Hawaiian terminologies, expressions, things along those lines in my videos. That's me taking my knowledge of Hawaiian language and Hawaiian culture and embedding them in this video, or rather the video series. I apply the same exact concept in my classroom. For example, when I first started teaching, I channeled my love of Star Trek and I actually started teaching my students Klingon. And one of the things that we ended up doing is, and this happened completely by accident, is we created a class motto that first year of me teaching, because I used the same term over and over and over again, and the same expressions, and the same phrase in Klingon came up over and over and over again. And that expression was Kapla Bafje, which in Klingon means success and honor. And for the first couple years of my career as an educator, that was an expression that came up over and over and over again during my time as a high school teacher. Then, once the movie Moana came out and I began to realize that I could actually share on the mainland certain authentic parts of my culture and actually have them understood, I began teaching students phrases in Hawaiian, terms in Hawaiian, and the official slogan for my class every single year since that point has been Aole Pilikia, which in Hawaiian means no problem. Sometimes the word aole is substituted with its English synonym no, but it's always aole pilikia or no pilikia. And this is something that I'd like to emphasize in terms of you blending your interests with theirs, because it's very much like a focus group, folks. It's one of those things where I would like to, and maybe someday this will happen, have students develop a more complex understanding of the Hawaiian language. For the last couple of years, I've been throwing out for the students to not necessarily retire no pilikia, but adopt something more complex. I was really pushing for aihiki ao, which in Hawaiian means yes, I can. We actually have these slogans done up on t-shirts, by the way, almost every year. And just doesn't test well. No pilikia, aole pilikia works a lot better. And instead of fighting that, I embrace that. And that's the sort of thing that students really enjoy. And it's one of those things where you're giving them something from your interests in a class appropriate setting, and they take that and they run with it, and that's what builds community there too. The next directive, that again is almost every bit as important as the previous three, is developing student-driven instruction. Folks, the age of lecturing is dead. It should have died a long time ago. And I could do, and I am planning on doing, an entire playlist video series on the weaknesses of quote unquote traditional instruction and how applying innovative student-driven instruction can be a lot more powerful, a lot more effective, and beneficial for all parties concerned. It is not lost on me, folks, that I teach AP classes, but I've never lectured an AP class ever. I really try to avoid that. I've developed lessons, and I'm looking forward to sharing this knowledge with you all, in which I present the content, and the students take that content and put their own spin on that content in a way that builds community, builds positively and constructively reputations with students, of students in the classroom. And it's something that can be phenomenal once you've adopted that. Everything else comes together and culminates in student-driven instruction. For example, I have developed something that I call historical theater, or if you prefer, historical improv, in which students assume identities of historical figures on a particular topic. And they go and they present their perspective on that topic, their argument. But then, within class-appropriate reasons, they are free to add embellishments and go off script. For example, and there's a link to this in the description below, in the historical theater on the American Revolution, I will never forget this. I had a student, I had him once before. That first year I had him, he was extremely quiet. I was in a class with him, I taught a class for him rather, where he didn't speak much in that setting. But then once he came to my AP US history class for historical theater, he decided to be Samuel Adams. For some reason, all the best performances happen with Samuel Adams in this activity. And he just decided his ad lib was to deliver his argument in a sort of punk rock sort of fashion. And he basically screamoed his entire argument and dressed up in sort of punk rock attire. And from that standpoint, and this happened in late September, early October, he found a niche. And every historical theater we did after that, he did, and he experimented with some more. I'll never forget, we did a historical theater on World War II involving Charles Lindbergh. And his ad lib and his improv, if you will, for that lesson was delivering his lines in the same way as the character Zap Brannigan in Futurama. And it was absolutely phenomenal. And I will always remember this because after he finished his class with me, he actually auditioned for our school's musical that following year for the Addams Family, and he actually landed the lead role as Gomez Addams. And it's one of those things where student-driven instruction is where it's at. It is possible, and depending on the APSI you go to, it's even encouraged that you ditch the quote-unquote traditional instructional methods for AP and try something new. And this entire channel is dedicated to that, so let me know if you're interested in that. So with that in mind, we're going to go to Directive 5, and I'm very curious to see where I end up there. So let's energize. This feels weird. It's kind of like home. Honestly, it reminds me of Portland during the summer of 2021, but I digress. With that said, your fifth directive is to gamify as much of the content and procedures that you cover and do in your classroom as you can. Now, I am planning on making an entire video series dedicated to this exact topic. So please let me know in the comments below if I should prioritize this part over all the other parts I'm planning. With that in mind though, real quick, how do you gamify materials? How do you gamify procedures? Well, you could take a topic or a procedure that you do in class that's difficult and turn it into something fun. For example, in my AP US History class, I have a little activity in which students, during the document-based questions section, which if you know what that is, you'll know that it is a terrible abomination. No high school student, let alone grown adult, should be required to do what they're being asked in the time that they're given, but I digress. And during this activity, when I teach DBQs, students are split up into what are referred to as document investigative groups. And students in each DIG or document investigative group have the opportunity to go through. They have to describe, support, and if they fully source the document, meaning they determine the document's point of view, its purpose, its context, and its intended audience, it's very similar to earning all of the Infinity Stones. I actually refer to Pov-Perconia factors as Infinity Stones. So this is actually from my classroom, folks, and what ends up happening is we have the Infinity Gauntlet Challenge, and this is a very brief way in which you can gamify a topic or a procedure in your classroom. Whenever we do a DBQ, folks, if a student can go through and do all of the activities, all of the components that they're required to do, document description, document support, and document analysis, they get to wear the glove and do the snap. There's something extremely cathartic about making a fist at a DBQ. If you've ever done one, or graded one for that matter, you know what I'm talking about. So that's the deal there, folks. Real quick, this is just an intro into the topic. Please bear in mind, I'm planning on doing a lot more with that exact topic, but that's the 5th directive. That is the final piece to create a really good community in your classroom. With that in mind, let's beam back to the superposition. So let's see how this one works. See if I can use this correctly to go back to my classroom. The superposition, go. Here we are. Home sweet home. Gotta say though, I did enjoy visiting the Enterprise and the Klingon ship, and the Infinity Gauntlet. My goodness, that's a lot of fun too. So let me know what you think, folks. As we close up this video, what are your thoughts? Is there a directive that I'm missing? Please know that I am planning on doing an entire series on building community in classroom, but these tend to be the top 5 directives that have been really helpful to me starting out. So with that said, folks, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know in the comments below. And as always, please like, share, and if you want to be part of the Enterprising Educators crew, please subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Energize. Hello again. Mahalo nui loa for watching that video. Don't forget to tune in every Teacher Tuesday for a new Enterprising Educators video, and if you have an idea for a new video, please let me know in the comments below. So, with that said, live long and prosper, e mo lama pono, and see you next time.